hello to those of you who have joined us in person. Thank you all for joining us for our first grad speaker event this semester and our first in-person event in 2 years. My name is Sarah Flynn. I'm the Research and Educational Services Archivist in Special Collections. And the Special Collections Graduate Student Speaker Series began in 2018 and is presented in partnership with the Graduate School and International Education. The goal of the series is to provide graduate students who have conducted research in special collections with a forum in which to present that research and an opportunity to gain experience in public speaking. I want to thank Kelsey, the library's PR director, and Laura Moyne, the director of graduate student support, for helping us to promote this series. Today, we are going to be hearing from Whitney, a recent graduate of the Masters in Journalism program here at the University of Arkansas. Whitney did research on the Black Americans for Democracy, which was a student group originally started on the U of A campus in the 1960s. They also published a newspaper, The Bad Times, in the 70s, and they are a precursor to our modern day Black Student Association. I had more to say, and I've forgotten where I was going with this, but thank you for joining us. I'm gonna turn it over to Whitney.
You have to like clap now because I see you. Well, hello everyone. My name is Whitney King, and like Kara said, I was on a project in conjunction with the Prior Center over in the square that was doing some research for Black Americans for Democracy, which turned into a UA historic timeline update, which turned into a giant project that would have taken years and years to do. So anyway, let's get started. First off, I just wanted to tell you a little bit about me, and I absolutely love this photo. I will never have another one this way again. I was born in Houston, Texas, and I spent my first 21 years there. And I had the opportunity to start my higher education at Arkansas State in Jonesboro. So I ended up getting my bachelor's degree in 2018, and one of my favorite advisors actually ended up getting a job here. And so I followed her. And Renette McCargo, she's amazing. And so I followed her here. She encouraged me to tackle a dream that I had of being a documentary filmmaker. So I ended up having an emphasis in documentary film and getting my master's degree during COVID in the spring of last year, 2021. Since then, I started my own production company, which was part of the plan. And I also ended up starting a candle company where I make 24 karat gold covered candles, which is completely random, and it started as a COVID hobby. Anyhow, that became really successful. So I'm going to keep that going and do my production as well. And I don't have a big girl job, and it's very fun. I am engaged. This is actually my fiance, Brianna, here with us today. And I have 3 cats. I don't have kids, so I have to show you pictures of my cats. Those are my babies. So anyway, let's actually talk about what we're here for. So I'm sure as a lot of you have seen, there's been a lot of talk on campus about the Bad Times newspaper. Well, that is just the very surface of this story. That is what we were able to tangibly see and hold. We have the records thanks to special collections, but Bad Times was because of an organization on campus called the Black Americans for Democracy. And that in and of itself is just, it's like a wormhole. There's so much information there that I did not know as a Black student on campus. And a lot of the people that are actually working on campus now, like Angela Mosley-Mon, benefited from this organization. So I don't know, has anyone seen the Honors College? They made like a YouTube series of that, you know what I'm talking about? Okay, so it was just focused on the newspaper. I actually got to interview some people that were in that series. Edward Duffy was one of them. But they actually told a very different story. So the Times was a way to get news out there, but Black Americans for Democracy was the important part of what was going on campus. So let's talk a little bit about what it was. So we have to rewind. I wasn't alive back in the late 60s, early 70s. My parents were not alive in the late 60s, early 70s. So let's rewind and talk about what was happening at that time. We are just past the very peak of civil rights. Black students are on campus, but I wouldn't say that it was exactly a friendly situation that was going on here. So even now, the Black population on campus isn't representative of what Arkansas is, right? So just imagine that back in 1965, 1970, it was, I'm sure it was much smaller, right? So when you come onto a campus, there's a lot of people that don't look like you, don't have the same experiences as you. And sometimes it's kind of hard to find your place. It's hard to find your place even when you look and have grown up similar to people, right? So for someone coming from, let's say there was one person that I ended up interviewing, and her family they were sharecroppers. Her brothers and sisters were all very intelligent. Almost all of them got college educations, which is something that their parents didn't have access to. So to come from that in a remote part of Central Arkansas to Fayetteville with a bunch of white kids, nobody knows what it's like to be you. It's important that you have somewhere on campus to be who you are and to be with people that know what it's like to be you and look like you. So it wasn't just a group to talk about social problems, although there were plenty and there still are plenty. It was a place that people could come and feel safe. And that is one of the largest things that I learned when I was doing my interviews. It wasn't about the newspaper. It was about having a community outside of your own community at home, right? So, and it kind of got people included in a way that wasn't available before. I remember reading an article, and I can't tell you where it was from, but I believe it was in this very room, where BAD, or Black Americans for Democracy, actually had a beauty pageant that was only for Black students. Well, the article went on to explain, like, we needed to have a Black beauty pageant because they couldn't compete with their counterparts, right? So things like that, it gave Black students a way to get into leadership positions that weren't available before. It gave Black writers and journalists a way to express their feelings and emotions that wasn't getting expressed by the traveler. And there were some people that were of color on the Travelers Committee, like Gerald Jordan. I'm sure all of you have heard his name. And he has a different story about it. So I think it really depends on your background, where you've come from, what you've experienced, and where you kind of stood on that fence. So to kind of back up a little bit and how I ended up getting into BAD. The Pryor Center is, I don't know if you would call them an affiliate of the University of Arkansas. They're a part of the University of Arkansas system. They focus on oral and visual histories that have to do with Northwest Arkansas or the campus itself. So I ended up becoming an intern, I believe it was fall of 2020. With the idea that we were going to make a project on historical figures that had anything to do with the U of A that were minority, so people of color, women, disability, or LGBTQ. Cool. Until you start looking at how many people that is, right? So we start off with this little list, like, oh, here's like 6 names, we can go down this, and I'm starting to do my research, and this is all before I get to special collections, right? My list had over 80 people on it. Huge project, right? We got to break this up. So how are we going to break it up? Are we just going to do Black people, Black students, Black alums? What are we going to do? So just when that was happening, the Honors College was coming out with their series. And the Pryor Center said, well, wouldn't it be cool to just have raw interviews with those individuals and letting them tell their story? So that is how I got started with Bad Times. So I actually had the pleasure of meeting some of these people in person, even though it was during COVID. We practiced social distancing, and some people that were still on campus, like Angela Mosley Mons, was a key player in that project. Other people I got to interview virtually. And the picture became very clear that when, so if you have a panel of 4 people, it's like parts of stories get told, as opposed to when you have someone that is individually in an interview, you can get a lot more and go a lot deeper into that conversation. So at the prior center, we actually don't edit anything. So an oral and visual history is, you can hear absolutely everything they're saying, nothing's cut out. The interview is not part of the process. So it's very different from what you would see like on a TV show. So as I was working on that, I was coming across names for the save for later category that maybe didn't fit into the bad times category themselves. So as that started happening, I already talked about it. Well, that's Angela too. I already talked about that. But as that started happening, I noticed that I got a lot of little hints, like Ancestry.com, a lot of little leads. I would get these hits online about special collections, special collections, special collections. And so I was like, well, maybe I can use some stuff at special collections to kind of corroborate what people are saying about bad times. So I came down here and I was sitting right there and I requested, I think, the maximum of what I could. And some of the boxes just said unknown, you know? And so it was like, okay, well, they're in order. There's bad times here, there's unknown, there's more bad times there. Let's see what's in there. So the minutes from bad times are actually still here and available. You can read all of them. All of the notes on elections, like when they had leadership, all of the advertisements for Miss Black University of Arkansas are still here. And then mixed in with that were photos of bad times officers later. So this was in, I think, like 1996, and she was, Dinah Gant was president of Bad Times, like 74, I think. So they were all mixed together, and I don't know if that was like a happy accident or if they knew who that was, because I actually didn't find a picture of her from back in the 70s in the Bad Times folders. And that was in an unknown box. So I guess it's serendipity that that happened. But anyway, I kind of got off topic there. So let's move forward. So anyway, when I was saving my names of people for future projects, when we do Asian American history, when we do pioneers with disabilities in history, all that kind of stuff. What I learned about historic research is it's never what it looks like. It's never cut and dry. You are never going to be able to go to one source and get the full story. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that key people have been forgotten, whether that was accidentally, whether it was because of their gender, whether it was because of their race. So when I came down here to read about bad times and to read about some of the other people that I was looking into, it became very clear that a lot of history was missing. And at least some of that can be recovered here. And I would really like to get the unknown folder and try to figure out who was what in that folder. That would be very fun for me. All that to say, there's a lot of history about the University of Arkansas that we don't know. Super quick fun fact, I didn't make a slide about it, but the person that signed the charter to get Old Main built where it's built was actually a Black man in 1870, whatever. I'm not a historian. I will never claim to be one. I did not know that African Americans were in power for a short time in the South there, but it just so happened to coincide when the university was being built. And there's actually a whole book. And what's it called? The library right there. You know what I'm talking about? Isn't there a library down here somewhere of random old books? There's a whole book on him, and he was like white passing, but he was African American. Anyway. All right. This is what I don't do, the PowerPoint. But so anyway, after researching bad times, I got introduced to the UARC historic timeline, which I was not aware of. I don't know if undergrads are aware of it, but grad student, I had never heard of the UARC historic timeline. And I started going through, and at this time, I had a few people that were pretty prominent in my research, and I'm going to look, and there's nothing, right? So it gets better as time goes on, but especially in the early days, late 19th century, early 20th century, there is absolutely nothing about people of color on there besides like, oh, the first Black student was here, oh, okay. So then I started working with the people that update the UARC website. So now we've gone, this is why this project is so crazy. We've gone from historic figures in minority or marginalized communities to now let's just do Black people that have historic significance. Now let's just do bad time. Oh, but wait, now we have to update this because you've scouted out hundreds of people that should be on here and hundreds of events that should be on here that aren't. So anyhow, some of the bubbles ended up getting updated by me. I was creating just like these master roster Excel sheets of who, what, when, where, why, and how, and sending them to get updated on the UARC historic timeline. So some of them have been updated, some of them have not. I don't know what qualifies an event or something taking place to be significant enough to be on here, but I would encourage anyone that's doing research that comes upon something that is not on the timeline that you think should be, reach out to somebody. I think it's important, especially if it's someone of color or even a woman. It's very underrepresented even in 2022. So key takeaways, and you guys can like stop me if you have any. I know a lot of you know what you're doing, but like if you have any questions, please stop me. But key takeaways from my experience on researching bad times, coming down to special collections was, this is a fantastic resource. It's kind of hidden under the second floor of the library. And I did not know all of this was here. And I was introduced to it, right? I actually came down here before I was a student. Someone was showing me around. So this is a fantastic collection of historic documents that have to do with this area and even outside of the school. So I would urge everyone to go online and look and see what is there. Great resources for thesis, if anyone's doing that. My thesis was new research, but anyone that's doing research on historic things, this is a great resource. Second, do not let this portion of your research stay until the last part. It's not a good idea to come in at the 11th hour and try to find something. You're gonna find more than what you think you're going to find, absolutely. I was down here and I'm pretty sure I held an original photo of Martin Luther King Jr. and I had like a silent stroke, I was freaking out. Anyhow, do not wait for this at the end. This should be the beginning of your research. When you're looking at historic documents, you're always going to find another path. You're always going to find someone else's side of the story. Another thing is all history is important. So in my experience as a Black woman, I went through school in Texas in the South, and even here, textbooks are written a certain way. They include certain people, and they don't include other people. So it's a great way to kind of write things for yourself. Give these people a platform that they deserve, instead of being in a basement and never looked at again. And lastly, ignoring history because it wasn't written in the mainstream books is a mistake. And it's something that our students have to realize, especially when writing research papers, you want to give a big picture, everyone's side of the story. And without digging further, unfortunately, we can't do that. So that's one of the main reasons why I think special collections is so special. It's because a lot of it's been preserved that would have normally been lost. So anyhow, that's all that I have.
Thank you,
Was
Whitney.
that a hand raise?
Yeah, we're
Okay.
gonna do Q&A.
Please ask
Yeah.
me questions.
Feel
I
free.
have two questions. One of them pretty easy probably, but, do they have the actual paper newspapers in here? And if so, what kind of condition are they in?
So I did not actually handle the paper ones. There is a full digital collection, which for my time and sanity, I utilized. But
Yes,
Can you answer that?
we do have the original. As many issues are in the digital collection, we have the
You
physical
can preserve
copies.
those, okay? Or you're able to preserve those?
They're in somewhat fragile conditions, so that's a big part of why they've been digitized, as far as I understand it. That predates my time here, but Lori, I don't know if you want to comment on that at all.
100%
Okay.
But I will say, on the digital collection, like you can read everything still. So that's the important part, you know?
No, I didn't even show that, I mean, it's a, photo, you can see the original context and everything, so, which is important, I think, I don't think, newspaper projects that only show the text without showing the context really miss a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I pulled those from the special collections. I've had them on my computer, I've been reading them, but yeah, I would imagine they are fragile, but.
And then the other thing was there some event that sparked the, formation of BAD? Was there some event on campus?
One particular event? No, not that I came across in my research. I think it was a culmination of a lot of things. It was people that couldn't find their cohort here. It was people that were living in a very racist world that needed a safe space. It was people that were looking for mentors and guidance that would understand who they were. And it was people that wanted to build a community when a lot of them did not live here. So family wasn't close by. A lot of them were from the Delta, Central Arkansas, and even further than that. So it's almost as important, when you're going through school, it's like this metamorphosis that happens. You're like blooming into an adult, right? But you can't do that on your own. And so for a lot of people, like Angela Mosley Mons, she is younger than the generation that formed it. And for her, even in the early 80s, which to me doesn't sound that long ago, she would go to the Bad Times office just to have a quiet place to study that she felt safe in. So was there one event that sparked it? I don't think that there was, but I think it was a lot of people that were searching for people like that.
I mean, I do remember something that's kind of sketchy as far as my memory of reading about this, but I think it was around the time of the big Arkansas Texas football game in 1969. There was some violent incident on.
So it actually happened before that. BAD was formed, I believe it was late 67.
Okay.
Don't quote me on that. It was before 69 though, but there was a lot of turmoil in terms of Black students attending games. The first Black cheerleader, I mean, the N-word's flying all over the place. We're still playing Dixie, So there are a lot of things going on in the sports realm. And then there's a stereotype that all the Black guys that are here because of sports, right? So there's a lot going on. Sports had a lot to do with it, whether you were a player or a patron.
Right.
Anything else? Y'all don't leave me hanging up here.
I really loved the way you talked about recovering stories and history and discovering parts of our history that we just don't, and stories that we don't tell. I'm wondering, and you alluded to seeing some holes and some histories that we just still don't have. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that. So what stories did you see glimpses of that you weren't able to fully research with the resources that we have?
One thing that stood out to me, and I'm not sure you would particularly find it in the Bad Times documents, but for a firsthand account of what it was like to be a Black student on campus, that had to come from them. I didn't find much record of that. Essentially, everything that talked about racial issues that were going on here, social issues that were going on, were written by white people, right? So, and that is the text that I had. The Traveler, you can find everything, right? So in terms of looking at the research I had versus looking at what I had after I actually did interviews, and fortunately, everyone, you know, a lot of the people that I looked for were still alive, right? If they weren't, right? So, like the question before, why did Bad Times happen? On paper, that might look very different than what I got from people that were actually there. And they didn't write about that. You know, it was not a good experience for them. There was actually, and I won't say their name, but there was actually one person in an interview that said they vowed to never step foot back on this campus. So if that just tells you anything, you know, I loved it here in 2019 through 2021. But that's because a lot of people did a lot of work for people that looked like me up until that point. So anyway, to get back to what your question was, I think a lot of the personal accounts that people experienced here are lost unless you get to someone before, you know, time runs out. There was one person, Elin Harris. He was in Bad Times, very prominent figure after school. He was a New York Times bestseller, and he was a gay Black man. He actually passed away in like 2006. So we got some footage from him, but it was before everybody like had the revelation that Bad Times happened. So we'll never know what it was like for him. So
He's got an interview in the Prior Center. Like,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
A lot of it is really good.
Mhm. Yeah, but then it's like, you know, we know that there are experiences that he had that he could shed some light into, and based on the prompt that he was given, you know what I'm saying? You have to specifically ask. Sometimes people volunteer information that isn't exactly what you're looking for, but when you specifically ask certain questions and other things start to come up, and then research makes sense. That makes any sense to anyone. Anything else?
I have a question. I've been trying to formulate it in a way that makes
Well,
sense.
I was kind of like all over the place.
But so I was just thinking about the context in which like the right now context in which your research was taking place. The hashtag Black at UArk, I think, was probably like summer, late spring, early summer, before the fall that you started this research. So I was just wondering if you had any thoughts you wanted to share on like kind of that continuum or the connection between the research that you were looking at and things that were happening with the Black student experience on campus, like right around or right leading up to your own research.
Well, I think a lot of that has to do with why Black at UArk started happening. There were a lot of national things happening at that time. Black Lives Matter was alive and well then, it still is, but it was like in its peak. A lot of controversy over that, right? So we see kind of like a division of sides when things like that happen. But I also think it encourages people to speak up. So when we look at some of the posts on Black at UArk, some of those are really painful and hurtful and shouldn't be happening. It's something that I did not experience personally. So I can't say, oh, that doesn't happen anymore, right? Because it does, it just didn't happen to me. And that's what's really important about researching each individual and speaking to each individual, because all stories are going to be different. I also think that it was important when the Honors College talked to current students too. My job title was to do histories, right? So I'm not looking at what's happening right now. I can use that to kind of dial it back to where I'm going. But there were several people that participated in that series, which I urge you to look at if you haven't, because you seem super interested. And it was current, I don't know if they've graduated now, but they were current as of 2020. But I think things like that also make us stop and look like, what, if we're experiencing this now, what in the world happened back then, right? So I can say that definitely the culture on campus was something that influenced this type of work to be done. And I think that's what happens a lot of times. Things come full circle, literally. So yeah, that's what I would say about that.
Any last questions for Whitney?
So you mentioned finding the picture of MLK that you're pretty sure is.
I just want to look at it again. I'm excited.
I was just wondering if there were any other unique finds or other surprises that you weren't expecting to come.
Well, there's one. Yeah, this is the original photo of Mark, I think original photo from 1964 with his family. In some of the unknown boxes and some other, I can't tell you what it was named, but I think it was the unknown boxes. It was like talking about different plays that happened in the 30s here and the 40s here. Negro project workers, like that's shocking to me. I was born in 1994. I did not experience what people experienced before me firsthand. I have never been called a name like that by someone, okay? So for me, as a Black person, looking at that turned my stomach. It made me ill that anyone would have to endure what I had listened to these people talk about. Can't imagine it, cannot relate to them, have not been through it, cannot imagine that. And they still try to be successful on top of it. You know, it's absolutely amazing what these people did. So yes, there were some surprises for sure. Lots of racial slurs thrown around. I did not put that in here because we're not gonna keep that alive. I don't even wanna talk about that, but yeah, that to end on a good note, because again, I'm getting a bad taste in my mouth. The Martin Luther King picture was totally cool. That was really cool. But yes, there were definitely some absolutely horrific things that I saw that you like hear about in movies, but it was real. Yeah. Anything else? You know about this project.
Well, thank you
That's it.
again, Whitney.
Oh,
This was
One
awesome.
question.
Yes, one
What's that?
last
I
question.
don't think we talked about it, but there was a photo of a woman speaking and no one knows who she is.
Oh, I put that on here.
And she did.
I want to find this woman. Like, this photo was just so powerful to me. And I don't know who she is, and I tried and tried. So anyone watching on YouTube or in the cyberspace knows who this lady is, I want to meet her.
She was a student champion. And sadly, there were so few of them.
If I knew which year, that would be more
Oh,
helpful
I'm
too.
sorry.
What building is that? Looks like.
That's the union.
Right, I mean, that's today's union?
Yeah,
Same place. Okay.
that's the union. I do not know when. I can guess, probably. Uh-huh.
Look at the clothes now.
Yeah. I love that picture. I have that saved on my phone.
Great. Thank you so much. This was super cool.
Thanks.
Thanks.